Who are the powers that be in your quick overview?
Well,
any
the only
names?
Ones, yeah, I mean, we know very few of the powers that be, but we know that David Rockefeller is one of those. Mm-hmm. We know there's always a Rothschild up there in one of those committees. I suspect that Henry Kissinger has moved up into the actual top echelon. They usually try to keep a lower profile than that, but Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski have been such power players over the decades that I can't believe they aren't actually meeting and calling the shots on how this goes. Nobody knows the game plan, about promoting war eventually with Russia and China like Brzezinski and Kissinger.
Okay, let's shift over to the Middle East. The American Air Force has been told to avoid the Russian Air Force. We're pulling our Patriot missiles out of Turkey. I'm just noting developments here. We would almost look at the Syria situation at this point as a defeat for the U.S. And when you have people like Trump saying, let the Russians deal with it, I can work with Mr. Putin and all that, how do we read this? How does the World Affairs Brief play it out?
Well, my take on the subject is that, and frankly, I'm surprised that it took Russia so long, but Russia has jumped in and decided, the globalists created ISIS, and we can play this game too to protect Assad. Before ISIS, they didn't have the same excuse. They would be intervening, and it would look like they were protecting a tyrant. But now that ISIS is out there, and the U.S. has been so ineffective now, on purpose, of course, resupplying, falsifying the war on ISIS, delaying tactics so the airplanes can't bomb any crucial targets until they're out of fuel and have to go back to the ship. Bombing lots of pickup trucks, lots of empty buildings, but letting whole columns of celebrating troops and armored vehicles go down a highway after the Battle of Mosul and not having one attack on them.
Right.
I mean, this kind of stuff is just going on. And now we find, the U.S. is supposedly investigating and calling up Toyota Motor. How did they get all these hundreds of Toyota vehicles? I mean, talking about the pot calling the kettle black. The U.S. provided that.
I have that picture up, that one awesome picture of that long column of
That's right.
Those 4x.
All brand new, same model, Toyota Hilux pickup trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get these from different sources around the world and get the same model in the same year.
They came over in containers on ships. And,
That's right. They were provided by the U.S. government.
Right.
And everything about ISIS, has to make it a staged, make the world angry, create the most heinous crimes available. And no caliphate, no Muslim caliphate trying to provide a world government for Muslim would go around trying to irritate the whole world, including other Muslims. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. This is clearly a false flag operation to justify the continued war on terror. But Russia, openly condemned the U.S. at the Sochi Olympics. Putin said, that the U.S. is largely responsible for the creation of ISIS. But he isn't saying that now. He's piggybacking on the war on ISIS to say, I'm going to come in and help you. What can you say? Mm-hmm. And the U.S., of course, has protested, beat around the bush. But it's very, very telling that this week the U.S. has had 2 meetings with Putin, and Putin keeps saying, let's share intelligence data. You're claiming that we're not hitting ISIS, and we're hitting others. So give us the coordinates. This is very telling. Give us the coordinates and satellite pictures of the targets you want hit, and we'll go hit them. And the U.S. refuses to respond.
He's really playing, right now, brilliant chess, just embarrassing Obama no end. He's supposedly...
he knows the U.S. can't give him decent coordinates because the Russians will hit it.
It's hysterical. Their technology has so far come off as being first rate.
Yes, this is the first time the United States military has had a chance to see the Russian, and we don't even know if it's the top of the line. This is stuff in the inventory, and it's very, very effective.
That's a very important point you just made. It may not even be top of the line. And I would think you're right. I've been thinking about this here and there. for the last week or so. Is this really their best? Why would they expose?
That's right.
Now, we get telemetry from these laser-guided, GPS-guided munitions, whether they're bombs or cruise missiles, it doesn't matter. So we can learn a lot from that. Now, why would they expose that to our prying eyes?
Well, and they're trying not to. That's why they started out with only dumb bombs. Then they started in with cruise missiles. Now they are starting to use a few GPS, but they're not showing any laser-guided bombs or laser designators yet. Their cruise missiles, however, did have good accuracy. The U.S. claimed that a couple of them went down in Iran. Iran has denied that, but their accuracy of their cruise missiles coming from some 2,500 kilometers away in the Caspian Sea was within 10 meters, which is pretty accurate. But it's not top of the line, because top of the line stuff is going to be able to go through the window of a building.
Oh yeah.
So I think that they're using their standard issue stuff and not revealing any.
It's very good, apparently, from what I can read and try and discern between the lines. It's excellent.
It is, and that what was so laughable about the saber rattling by Turkey. Going to shoot down your Russian jets. I don't care.
Not a good idea.
I don't care if Turkey has F-16s. The Russian arsenal has several makes of jets that will compete well against the F-16, and the pilots are much better. I don't think the Turkish pilots want to go up against the Russians.
I can't imagine it. No.
And well, so the latest attack in Turkey has decided, NATO's going to start to put some troops and things. But I still don't think the U.S. wants to, or the U.S. or NATO wants to challenge Russia, and Russia knows that. And that's why, essentially, they're thumbing the nose at the globalist agenda and said, look, you could play this phony war on terror game, and we can too. And what can you say? The world is cheering Putin. And, of course, part of the biggest success that Putin is having is all of a sudden he's wiped away the taint of his stealth invasion of Ukraine, and suddenly he's the hero. This has done wonders for Putin's image worldwide. I don't happen to share that. I know that Putin is still building weapons of mass destruction to attack the West, and so is China. But nevertheless, I can't help but applaud when somebody with such finesse, and the chess player's finesse, goes in and just sticks and pokes the globalist in the eye with a great big stick and watch them squirm. There's nothing they can do, although I have a feeling that there are a couple of options they may play. One, they may induce Israel to attack what they view as Hezbollah forces in Syria, or Republican Guards and other Iranian forces. And Saudi Arabia could do that too, although Putin just met with the Saudi princes, and they backed down. They were basically, first of all, the press reports coming in says the Saudi says, we don't approve, and we're really holding a line, and then all of a sudden it came out that Saudi has agreed to be quiet and let Russia do its thing. So I'm not sure. Saudis are in a tough position. The U.S. continues to protect them from their pedophile reputation around the world, and from the Arab Spring type uprisings that surely would happen in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Russia's kind of letting them know, look, the U.S. may not be around in the Middle East to protect you after we get through, so you better learn to play ball with us too.
Well, the Iraqis have asked the Russians for help. The
Iraqis have already provided the Russians with an air base now, so they can operate out of Iraq. The U.S. doesn't like that at all, but the U.S. really isn't in a position to cut off aid to Iraq either. Otherwise, it falls quickly into the Russia-Iran orbit, and then they're really in trouble.
Well, I don't know how they're going to stop that from happening, but you're correct.
The only way that they could do it is for Israel to actually start a separate war with Syria.
Well, they shelled 2 Syrian military posts in the Golan Heights area today. I think it was today. And there's a tremendous amount of oil, which they knew was there all along, I'm sure. And they could go in there militarily into Golan.
Well, what's interesting is that the excuse that Israel used to retaliate against Syria when it was rebels, U.S.-backed rebels that attacked Israel, was that Syria is responsible for everything that happens on its territory. And these happened in the Golan. So there was a tacit admission. This is still Syrian territory, but when there's oil there, suddenly it's Israeli territory.
Right, right. I think they knew the oil was there. Meanwhile, the Palestinians, all the young male Palestinians asked, all of them apparently said there is no chance for a two-state solution anymore. They've given up on that. And I think what you're seeing is an entire populace now headed into, not an exile, but a diaspora. I mean, they're gone. No one's going to rebuild Gaza. No money for that. Not going to happen. And the Israelis will just knock it down again. And they're continuing to bomb it. You don't hear about it, but they'll go in there and they'll bomb for a day or so and then knock down more buildings. And it's over. It's all over in Gaza. And I think you're going to see that become part of greater Israel. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but there may be camps, smaller areas for Palestinians left for a while, but I think the plan is to get them all out of there.
Well, I do disagree. I don't think that the Palestinians have any place to go.
No, they don't. They have nowhere to go.
Yeah. But as I've long predicted, I said there will never be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians because the Israeli leaders are globalists. They don't want peace. The Palestinian leaders, the Hamas, etc., are radical as well, and they use their own people as cannon fodder. I mean, you have two. Of course, Israel is worse in a little bit of a sense because it's got the power of the press, it's got the power of globalism, the power of money, and the military power to do things in a more humane way, and they don't do it. And that's because I think they're following a globalist agenda of conflict creation. You know, when they attacked Lebanon a decade ago, it's the first time that the Israeli Air Force went out to attack humanitarian infrastructure targets, hospitals, roads, bridges, power plants, just to create havoc in a country, and that creates hatred against. You know, they had a lot of goodwill among the Christian and the other Arab factions that were pro-Israel in Lebanon. They lost all of that. And that can't have been an accident.
Agreed. I don't think we're going to see an Israeli attack on Iran. I think we're going to see something much closer to home, maybe a complete military absorption of the Golan Heights or an attempt to do it. You'll see action I think, Air Force action in Lebanon again. I don't think they're going to go all the way into Iran with any kind of military projection. It would be, I think, suicidal. I forget how many missiles the Iranians say they have pointed at Israel. Are they lying? Probably. But it was some enormous number. And in Lebanon, there are a huge number of missiles pointed at Israel as well.
Yeah, but they're small diameter missiles.
Right.
They don't have any large missiles.
Well,
Iran really doesn't have a large amount of missiles. Syria is the one that has the largest amount of Scud missiles, and they're the biggest threat. They're right on the border with Israel.
How many do they have? What are we talking about?
We're talking about 1,000 missiles.
It's a lot of Scuds.
That's a lot of Scuds. And though they're not too accurate, if they're launched in salvos of 100 at a time, it can overwhelm the Iron Dome system, and the Israelis knew it. That is why, they protested the globalist demand that they attack Iran back when Iran was on the table and said, we've got to take out Syria first before we'll attack Iran. Now, this puts a major chink in that plan. Because if Syria doesn't go down, Israel says that we're not going to attack Iran. Now, remember, this U.S.-Iran nuclear agreement is just a trap. It's a trap with so many technical things where Iran can be viewed as a violator that it's an automatic... it has automatic approval mechanisms for attacking Iran if they violate this agreement. So I think it's a setup. I think they signed this agreement strictly to make sure that they could take down Iran anytime they wanted to, but more particularly after Syria was out of the way, and that's been blocked right now by Russia.
Most interesting. We'll see. That oil was an interesting card to pop up on the table, too, in Golan.
Yes, it is. And that makes Syria, very much. They want to reclaim
that oil. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't see it happening, but I haven't studied the region well enough to know how big the Golan Heights, the occupied, claimed Golan Heights are by the Israelis. How big of an area is that? Do you know?
It's about 5 miles wide by about 10 miles tall, north to south. Not that big.
Yeah.
I've been up there, and it's lightly populated. There are settlements up there on the Golan, and
Israeli settlements?
Yes, Israeli settlements. They've basically knocked most of the Arabs out of there, and they've.
And you see, you don't hear that talked about much.
That's right, and so it's going to be, and that's why they've settled that, so that it'll make it very difficult for Syria to go back in there and reclaim it. But I think Syria would like to, because they're really short of oil right now. Now that most of their oil has been captured by the U.S.-backed ISIS and other rebels. Although that's taking back the U.S. or the Russians backing the Syrian army have made extreme progress in Hama province and Aleppo as well, and about a dozen other cities where they've retaken from the rebels. They are hitting ISIS targets out in the middle of Syria, but their actual military offensive is against the U.S.-backed so-called moderate rebels, of which there is no such thing.
No such thing. No way.
And so it's the big turning point. Of course, the U.S. can't put troops in there, but they have just resupplied, with about...
well, it was 50 tons, wasn't it?
50 tons, and that's a lot of equipment. The big thing that's been keeping Syria at bay is the TOW missiles that the U.S. has been supplying to the rebels through Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia bought 13,000 plus TOW missiles. Now, do you know how many billions of dollars that is? 13,000. Now, they could never use those in a million years, so it was clear that Saudi Arabia was stockpiling TOW missiles for the U.S. agenda, the globalist agenda of creating havoc throughout the Middle East, and they're supplying TOW missiles to the rebels in there, and they're deadly against Assad's tanks. But nevertheless, with Russian air power in there, and they've got the air power that targets those TOW missile launchers and things, and they have been taking them down two at a time, and so they've been making progress. It's a war of attrition, but I think it's more than small arms ammunition. I wouldn't be surprised, even though the U.S. denies it, they're going to start to put anti-aircraft missiles in there. But you start shooting down Russian...
No, not a good idea.
No, not a good idea, but not only that, of course, this isn't like Afghanistan, where none of the Russian helicopters had these automatic flare ejection devices to detect that. Yeah. They've all got them now, so it would have to be, another brand of missile, a high-tech missile.
Well, or they'd have to salvo them and hope that one or two didn't read the dummies up there. So.
Yeah, I'm with 50 tons going in there. I would suspect there's something more than small.
If that's an accurate quote, we don't know, but that's what we hear. That's a lot. I think we need to take a break here for a couple. Hang on, Joel. And,
okay.
We'll be right back with more. Our Patriot missiles out of Turkey. I'm just noting developments here. We would almost look at the Syria situation at this point as a defeat for the U.S. And when you have people like Trump saying, let the Russians deal with it, I can work with Mr. Putin and all that, how do we read this? How does the World Affairs Brief play it out?
Now, on purpose, of course, resupplying, falsifying the war on ISIS, delaying tactics so the airplanes can't bomb any crucial targets until they're out of fuel and they have to go back to the ship. Bombing lots of pickup trucks, lots of empty buildings, but letting whole columns of celebrating troops and armored vehicles go down a highway after the Battle of Mosul. And Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski have been such power players over the decades that I can't believe they aren't actually meeting and calling the shots on how this goes. Nobody knows the game plan, about promoting war eventually with Russia and China, like Brzezinski and Kissinger.
Okay, let's shift over to the Middle East. The American Air Force has been told to avoid the Russian Air Force. We're pulling.
Well, my take on the subject is that, and frankly, I'm surprised that it took Russia so long, but Russia has jumped in and decided, you know, the globalists created ISIS, and we can play this game too to protect Assad. Before ISIS, they didn't have the same excuse. They would be intervening, and it would look like they were protecting a tyrant. But now that ISIS is out there, and the U.S. has been so ineffective.
Who are the powers that be in your quick overview?
Well,
any
the only
names?
Yeah, I mean, we know very few of the powers that be, but we know that David Rockefeller is one of those. Mm-hmm. We know there's always a Rothschild up there in one of those committees. I suspect that Henry Kissinger has moved up into the actual top echelon. They usually try to keep a lower profile than that.